Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, and thank you so much for joining me and listening in to today's episode of The Art of Procurement. And today I'm actually welcoming two guests onto the show, Matt Curtis and Marcia Ayakaba. So Matt's formal title is Director of Procurement for T&D Services, which he tells me is utility speak for transmission and distribution services at American Electric Power, which is has another acronym, which is AEP. So AEP is a $16 billion revenue utility company serving customers across the US. And Marcia is a coach, trainer, and facilitator who works with Denali to design, build, and execute training programs that cover a range of procurement competencies, such as category management. And so in today's show, we actually focus on a couple of different areas. So the main part of the show is that about 4 years ago, AEP, they embarked on a procurement transformation journey, and Matt joined procurement as an outsider to the profession to lead the initiative. So the majority of today's show is actually a discussion with Matt about AEP's journey, including what their burning platform was, some of the keys to their success, and why focusing on delivering savings out of the gate actually lengthened the time it took to change the hearts and minds of their employees. I actually found out about AEP through Denali, who, as you no doubt know, are a friend of the show. So AEP engaged Denali to design and execute category management training as part of their transformation journey. And what brought AEP specifically to my attention was the admiration that Denali had of how AEP managed that transformation and how training was really a key part of their program. It was a strategic part of their program right from day one. So I asked Marcia, who joined us on the show, what it was about AEP that stood out that others could learn from. Before I do start the show, I just wanted to remind you that last week I did launch the Art of Procurement Patron program as a way for you to really invest in the accessibility of procurement thought leadership while receiving bonus content such as transcripts, videos, and the opportunity to work with me directly through one-on-one coaching or an accountability program that I've set up. Now, if you feel like you're getting any value from the show, then I'd just really appreciate if you at least are able to check out the website. It's at artofprocurement.com/patron. That's artofprocurement.com/patron. The Patron program starts at $5 a month, with gold memberships at $25 a month. And there are also corporate and service provider packages available. So that address again, artofprocurement.com/patron. Okay then, let's roll the tape on my discussion with Matt and Marcia. Hi there everybody, and welcome to today's episode of The Art of Procurement. And as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm actually joined today by two different guests. I'm joined by Matt Curtis of American Electric Power, or AEP, and Marcia Ayakaba of Denali. So Matt, Marcia, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for joining me. And I'm actually going to split today's conversation up into a couple of different parts. So first, I really want to dig into some of the details with Matt to understand a little bit more about AEP's procurement transformation journey. And then we'll segue into the role that training has played as part of that transformation. And I'll think, about asking questions around how you think strategically about the development and about training as part of transformation. But first, as I say, I want to go a little bit into AEP's transformation. And so first I'll start with just a couple of questions for you, Matt. And first of all, before we actually recorded, we talked a little bit about your background, and you have a really interesting background that's not procurement related. So I just wondered if you could share a little bit of how you came to be in the role that you're in within AEP and leading procurement transformation.
Sure. So I've been with AEP for about 20 years, and I started as an engineer in environmental. I spent time in project management. I've spent time in regulatory, and a number of other places over the years. But it's been, I think, just that perspective of the entire company and the end user of what procurement brings to the table has been really valuable.
Yeah.
So I guess it's been about 3 years ago now. I was approached about an opportunity to come lead a group within our procurement organization. And as my team reminds me pretty regularly, I am not a procurement professional.
Right.
I don't have that history. I don't have the intimate knowledge. But I think a lot of the transformation activities we've been working on, it's really not procurement specific. It's more organizational. It's change management. It's communication. It's relationship driven. And that's really not specific to procurement. You can bring those skills from any background.
Right. So what was your perception then of procurement as an outsider when you'd interacted with it before you then joined the team?
So, I think I told you this in one of our previous discussions, but honestly, 10 years ago, I would have not wanted to go anywhere near our procurement organization.
Right.
It was honestly kind of perceived as a backwater within AEP, and it was just a necessary function, but they really didn't add any value other than it allowed us to comply with our policies and procedures. And then about 4 years ago, I think the executives within AEP realized that there was a lot of value being left on the table by not more strategically attacking some of our contract relationships. So we started thinking about, as an organization, how we could bring more value to the table through the procurement organization, and started this whole transformation journey.
Do you think being an outsider to procurement helped you or hindered you, or maybe a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think outside procurement, those relationships that I've built over the years within the company definitely helped.
Right.
I could speak their language. I understood what their priorities were, and being able to have that conversation and be able to see things from their view. And I think they understood that I understood their view was really important. Honestly, within procurement, it took a little bit of time to gain some trust of those that have, I would say, the long-time procurement folks. To say, what's this outsider coming in? What does he know about what our business and what our role is? But again, I think it's back to that communication, change management, organization, relationship building. And over time, I think people have learned to have gained an appreciation for that kind of non-procurement perspective I may bring to the table.
When you look back, were there certain things that you did that you could point to that helped you in building that trust with your team, given the fact that you were coming from the outside?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a specific thing. It's with any sort of relationship. I think we've used the phrase here. What interest the person you're talking to gains trust. Show interest, ask questions, be engaged in what they're interested in, and all of a sudden they start to look at you in a different light. And that's really where I think it starts, is showing interest in what others are doing.
Yeah, and then they understand that at least you want to know about what they're doing, and you're not coming in with maybe some preconceived ideas as well. Because I guess if you come in with preconceived ideas, while you may have some in terms of what you want the result to look like, by being open-minded, makes them realize that you're here to learn from them as well.
Very much so. And as I said, it's a I'll bet even now, after 3 years or a little over 3 years in this role, I still, at least twice a week, I'm reminded I'm not a procurement professional.
Right.
And it's kind of become a running joke, but that running joke allows me to ask, a lot of times can ask questions that I may know the answer to, but it starts that dialogue and lets people open up and share kind of their perspectives on things.
Yeah, and it lets you understand how they're thinking, maybe their thought process, where if you were a long-time procurement professional, they may look at that and say, well, that's a stupid question.
Correct. I'm giving a benefit of the doubt when I ask.
I know. You have an excuse.
That's right.
So what I'd love for you to do is, you mentioned it was, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, you began on this procurement transformation journey. I wondered if you could just share with me, some of the steps that you took, and, thinking back to when you started as well, kind of what was the burning platform, and how was there, why was there a decision actually in the first place that we think procurement can bring more value? We should start to invest in increasing our capabilities there.
So I think there were two key pieces of it. So one, we had a pretty immediate budget concern that was looming on the horizon as a company. And at that point, it's all hands on deck. Every opportunity needs to be looked at and evaluated and chased down with some vigor. So that's obviously a company-wide feeling. And then, honestly, like a lot of things, a consultant. There was a large consulting firm doing a lot of different things in AEP, and they kind of pointed to this procurement piece and said, "Well, you guys are leaving a lot on the table by having this be more of a shared service support function versus a real strategic driver of what you guys are trying to accomplish." So that was the two key drivers that kind of pushed it from the beginning. Procurement was moved from organizationally, it was moved from a shared service kind of administrative role and function within the company to directly under the CFO, which brings a lot different attention to the company, a lot of different resources, and all of a sudden you have a much bigger stick when you go out and have those tough conversations initially with people about, we're going to ask you to think about and do things a little bit differently, and knowing you have that support behind. And then getting that, executive support from the CEO, from the COO, from the CFO on down, and having that engaged support of what we're trying to do has been really, really important.
And what were some of those initial reactions then when you started to tell people essentially that you're going to be doing things differently now and that procurement is here, and that there's going to be an expectation that they use procurement to buy outside products and services?
So I think the biggest challenge, and it's one, honestly, 4 years into this, we still struggle with is, it's the ownership of the relationship.
Yeah.
The business units, and that's kind of what we refer to, the operational side of the company, but the business units really believe and had operated that way for many years, where they owned that relationship with the vendor or supplier. Mm-hmm. They were going to tell them what they wanted. And many times they were the one negotiating deals. And then they would, kind of 11th hour, they would throw this fully baked deal over the wall to procurement and say, "Hey, put this on paper." Yeah. And putting yourself into that, inserting yourself into that process and trying to work upstream. You're not going to be at meeting one from day one, but maybe you can get in there at the 10th hour and then maybe the 8th hour, and eventually you work yourself upstream. And that's probably been the biggest challenge. And, we continue to come across pockets. I mean, we're not a huge company, but we're a 20,000 employee company. So you kind of have to, you're almost working that at an individual level of saying, hey Joe, why didn't you get us engaged earlier? And, well, I never have. Well, and having that conversation one-on-one, one person at a time takes a lot of time. And we'll continue to have that conversation for the next 3 or 4 years, I'm sure.
Yeah, that it's like we sometimes lose sight of it, but it's a human-to-human kind of transformation. It's about relationships, about talking to people individually, not necessarily just putting out there a process in your organization and expecting people to adhere to it.
Yeah, one of our business units, they talk about culture, but the culture, 20 square feet at a time. So, a cube is 5 feet by 4 feet. Mm-hmm. So culture change, transformation, procurement changes 20 square feet at a time, and that's how it has to happen.
So when you think about where you are today, I mean, are there things that you've done that you think have been particularly successful in contributing to your transformation, and then maybe things that you wish that you'd have known now that you didn't know at the time that could have sped up your transformation?
So I think, I touched on it a little bit there before, but I think the executive support has been key. That's, when push comes to shove, that's always helpful and really critical to being successful. So I think that's been good. I think a recognition internally that you need new blood, I guess, within the organization to really make this happen, especially, I said we've had a procurement organization that had served a function for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and there are people that had been in those roles. And asking them to all of a sudden, hey, I know that's what you've done for the last 20 years, but this is the way we're going to operate now. Right. And some of those people can make that change and some people can't. So recognizing that and not trying to shove that square peg into the round hole. Finding the right fit for those people that have been here, and then bringing in new people and new perspectives to tackle those new challenges has been important. Mm-hmm. Now, I think from the things that maybe we would maybe do differently. Honestly, one of the biggest challenges was with that budget burning platform. We went whole hog into sourcing.
Yeah.
Strategic sourcing, and we're going to source everything we have to squeeze every last dollar out of it. And I think we were successful. We were able to show a significant cost savings through that effort. But I think that probably from the long-term transformation, strategic partnership, strategic role that procurement needs to play going forward, that probably has made that a longer transformation. Whereas if we'd focused on that and build it out that way, as opposed to being so sourcing focused from day one, in a perfect world, we probably wouldn't have done it that way. But external factors kind of pushed us in that direction.
Why do you think that was then? Is it because by doing that forces you to focus on cost only, and then that damages relationships?
I don't know if it damaged relationships, but I think it did, as you're trying to get the broader organization to change the way that they think about procurement, and they think about the broader value that procurement can bring to the table. Yeah. When you're starting that conversation and trying to change the perception, if the first 2 years of that conversation, all you're talking about is cost savings,
right?
You don't have the opportunity, or you have fewer opportunities to share the broader value that you can bring. We have been lucky. We've had a couple of really interesting projects where we've worked with the business unit, and we're changing their internal work processes. Really, eventually it'll have an impact to the outside vendor, but those internal processes, and I can't show a hard dollar value cost savings from that today, but I know it's going to be out there in the future. But those are the ones where you can really start talking about the true value that procurement can bring to the table versus just that sourcing process and in bidding and negotiating and driving down cost, which is part of it, and it's an important part. But when you're so focused on that, it's hard to have the time or the opportunity to focus on all those other things that honestly take a lot more time to put in place, but they can be a lot more impactful.
Yeah, it's interesting. You say that as well about the fact that you're going straight into sourcing and saving because, that's an imperative, but that when you're going to your business trying to sell change, and then you're doing the thing that procurement has the bad reputation from doing in the first place, it's not really helping change hearts and minds, is it?
No. I don't want to say it got in the way, but I think it slowed down that transformation.
So as you were looking to kind of upskill the organization, the capabilities within the organization, at what point did you decide that training needed to play a key role? And was it something that you thought about strategically in terms of fitting it into the transformation, or was it more, iterative? So we've got to a certain point now, how do we get to the next level?
Honestly, I think it was from the beginning. It was recognized. Yeah. We were, I think lucky as an organization to have some smart people at the beginning of this transformation recognize some of those pieces, and we did a procurement-wide competency assessment almost out of the gate, just to kind of say, hey, where are we? What do we do? What do our skill sets look like? And we were able to use that, the survey results of our individuals to kind of say, here is where we need to be good, and here's kind of where we are, and using that to guide, there's obviously some pretty sizable gaps out of the gate on something like that. And that's allowed us to kind of prioritize a training. I don't want to call it a program because it's not that formal. Yeah. But, as we've said, hey, this next year, here's where our gaps are, and we need to focus on these. And we work on those in that year, and the next year we move to the next piece and say, okay, here's where our gaps are in this year, and we need to go attack those in a formal way. So we've been able to put together a couple of different types of programs, some very informal, some more formal, over the last couple of years to try and minimize those competency gaps that we know exist.
And as you look for the funds to do that, was that something, because I hear mixed views, so whether their training budgets are increasing, whether they're decreasing, was it an easy sell to fund the training because it was part of the transformation? Would you recommend that you include it as part of a transformation or tied to something else, as opposed to just going and asking for a training budget as something that's more supplemental?
Yeah, I think it helped that we've had that it's part of a broader transformation. But I think it also it helped having the competency assessment where you had something factual, I'll say, to point to and say we need to do something to address this. But I think the other part that's been helpful is we haven't spent, we don't have a multi-million-dollar training budget.
Right.
We've done this with, some internal resources, and we've structured things in a way that I think we've tried to demonstrate to, the people holding the money that we're doing this in a responsible way. Here's 3 programs that we're going to do internally with our own people, with our own expertise. Oh, but by the way, this is an area that we just don't have the expertise in or even the ability to learn, and we need some outside assistance for something like that. And that's, if you can show, I think, that you're putting forth that good faith effort, it's a lot easier sell than just say, hey, we need a training budget because we want to have somebody come in and tell us everything in the world.
Right. So that was really the key, was what can you do internally versus what do you think you really need help from the outside to be able to execute.
Right. And whether... you can always argue the effectiveness of internal type training versus outside training, but honestly, it goes a long way with your employees just to demonstrate, even if it doesn't always ring true 100% of the time, we're investing in you, we're investing in your skill sets, we want you to get better, we want you to make improvements, and that builds on itself. People appreciate that, and then they start to perform, they start to take on more things, and that just, you get that snowball effect as they see that the organization cares about their learning and their skill sets.
Hi there, so it's Phil here. So at this point in the interview, what I wanted to do is transition a little bit and dig more into the training aspect. So I asked Marcia if she could talk about the landscape at AEP, what it looked like at the time that Denali was engaged, and how that differs from what they typically find.
So once the foundation was really strong, the procurement team had moved from sort of back office support function to a true sourcing organization, and then we came in to try to help people understand, okay, what is the strategic piece that is on top of this? So they were doing sourcing, but they realized that, okay, it was kind of ad hoc, so they really put a formal process in place, and people had time. It was several years that people really had time to align around languages, processes, tools, just for the piece that can be considered as sourcing. And then we came in, so people were I felt that very strongly delivering the training, that it was a common base, no matter where people came from. And I think it's a utilities company, so people work at some of the procurement team sits at plants. So it's not everybody is in the central office. People are a little bit dispatched here and there. People work for different business centers, and so the entire procurement team doesn't necessarily interact with each other all the time. And but you could sense this strong alignment. People were doing the same job. They understood the vocabulary. Everybody was very strongly aligned there, which is a great place to start. It's not always the case in those kind of decentralized companies, and I've been at other utilities where literally procurement people speak different languages. And this is sort of what we see in terms of transformation in general, is that it is critical to have that foundation in place. If you don't, you can layer other processes on top of it, but you're going to move even slower because you won't have cohesion already within your own team. So that makes it difficult. It makes it also harder to share knowledge. It might potentially confusing for stakeholders if they're interacting with different parts of procurement.
Yeah.
And people are not aligned. And it kind of also hurts your credibility a little bit. So foundation is really, really critical and important. And I think a lot of work had been done on that. For us at Denali, we always say the category management foundation, it's less about understanding the process than it is about changing people's mindsets. So the purpose of those trainings, they're really more, because the process, we could send you a document and you can read about the process. But there's a true mindset shift that is required.
Yeah, Phil, I was just going to add, I think that common language and common foundation is really important. But as a non-procurement professional, I'll say this, procurement's not rocket science. She said, like Marcia said, you can go out on the internet and find 23 different sourcing strategies or sourcing processes, but they're all generally the same. So we were pretty deliberate about at the end of the day, we want this to be AEP's procurement strategy, AEP's procurement process, not Denali's or whatever other consultant, and nothing against Denali. We want it to be ours.
It's personalized to your company.
Yeah, and by being able to kind of get different perspectives and different viewpoints from individual trainers, individual companies, that's really important. That was important to us, just to say, oh, this is the way they do it. I'm going to take some of that, and that's a really great idea, and a little bit of this, and a little bit of our internal, and that then becomes the AEP process, not the consultants. You don't want 2 years from now still referring to the consultant from 3 years ago. That was theirs.
Right.
No, this is ours, not theirs.
Yeah. So you're taking some of the best practices and applying them to your specific needs of your company. And I hate that term, and I've spoken about this on the show before. I hate the notion of best in class. It's about building something that works for you in your environment with the people that you have, and based on what the ultimate goals are, what your goals are, and not necessarily something that's just off the shelf.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think here part of how Matt, so AEP and Denali, how we worked was really with that intention. Was we have a process that we know works really well, and that we share with lots of different clients, and we apply ourselves, our category managers, that's what they use, so we know it works. We know it delivers very significant results, and it has to work for your company. So before the training deployment, Matt's team, so the transformation team from AEP and us, we worked really closely together for them to really understand not only the process, but this mindset shift, what it is that we mean by that. And lots of content review took place. And so by the time the first training session happened, there was a really strong alignment, and I think a really strong buy-in from the transformational team to say, yes, this is something that's going to work for our organization.
Right. And Matt, from your perspective, when you were looking at different providers, what were you really looking for? Was it the technical expertise, or was it something a little bit deeper than that, and maybe the way that they're going to work with you? Yeah,
it was 90%. The I guess more strategic alignment, vision alignment. Would they be able to communicate to our people in a way that they understood? Were they willing to adapt to our language, our those foundational things that we knew we had in place?
Yeah,
we didn't want this to have that feel of, oh, here's somebody else coming in with a whole different way of doing things. No, this is just a same theme, same concept, same everything. It's just here's another piece to put onto that to make it all fit together in a way. This can't be something new. This has to be an evolution of what we were already doing.
And I want to tie this back into your transformation journey. And you said at the beginning about the fact that you did a skills assessment. I forget the exact term, but it was basically a capability assessment.
Right.
So how did you measure the success of the training? Did you wait, 6 months post, for example, the training, and then do a new assessment and see where the differences were? Or, was there a different way that you perhaps determined whether this was something that was really of value for money or not?
So I think there are kind of three ways. There was, kind of the standard, day of training or right after the training. There's that kind of instant feedback. Here, can you fill out the form, feedback that day? So we were monitoring that as we went and got really good feedback throughout. Honestly, the biggest thing, and I guess the second one is we are in the process of doing a follow-up competency assessment right now across the organization. So we are going to be able to do kind of a before and after, not exclusively for this training, but for the last year, just of all the other things that have went on to see if we've seen that movement. But honestly, the biggest piece I've seen is, do I hear and do I see the language, the concepts that we were talked about? I've seen. I was really excited. One of the visuals that was used in the training, our chief procurement officer made a presentation to our board of directors, and he used one of those visuals in his presentation to the board of directors. And if that's not proof that something has resonated with people, I really don't know what else is. But just that you see it, you feel it, you hear it, you see it utilized on a day-to-day basis tells you that it was effective.
And so is there anything that, you've been able to do after the training. So, one of the things that I've always experienced with training is that you often go to a workshop, for example, and you learn a lot, but it's hard to put into practice because you get back to your desk and then you start working on putting out the fires of the day, and you just don't have the time to essentially think about that mind shift set that enables you to put into practice all the things that you've learned. So I'm interested just to understand if there's something that you were able to do for your team that enabled them to put things into practice. Maybe it was after the fact coaching, or there was follow-up that you did, or whether it was just that the training was impactful enough that they were able to go and take it and apply it straight away.
Yes, I think the training was impactful enough. So you just see it kind of got absorbed into that every day. But at least for us, with where we are in our transformation, one of the specific requests coming out of it was, all of our category managers have responsibility for maintaining their category profile, their category management profile, whatever your particular flavor of calling that is. But we saw a real gap in ours, kind of in our transformation, is that we had a profile, but it wasn't an actionable profile. So that's a specific ask coming out of it was, hey, category managers, after this training, seeing and thinking about how that's laid out, we want you to go back and ensure that your category profile is actionable.
Yeah.
What are the specific things that you're going to go do to put all that information that you've gathered in the strategy even you've laid out? What are you going to do with that? So a very specific, discrete activity, asking people to go do in light of what they've heard and thought about.
Mm-hmm. So I'm cognizant of time, and I need to start wrapping up, and I always have a final question because I have both of you on the line today. I actually have a final question for both of you. So Matt, is there a piece of advice that you'd give to any leader on the role that external training should play as part of a transformation initiative, and how you got to think about that strategically?
Yeah, I think the external training, I think just that new voice, you think about sports, and I like sports analogies, but at some point that coach's voice becomes background noise, and you need a change. And I think the value of external training can serve that same role of, I can tell my team the same thing, and after a while they tune me out. So having a different voice with just a slightly different twist on that same message can be really impactful and can kind of jumpstart a whole new conversation around the same topic you've been wanting to talk about and have been talking about, but just that little to get over the hump about it. Hey, that new way of thinking about it, new way of approaching something, I think is really, really valuable.
Right. Marcia, the question that I had for you, and this is a question I actually really like to ask professional trainers, and it's more around self-development. What can listeners do who are listening today who really want to invest in their own self-development, and maybe they want to do it independently of their organization? The things that they can do that you always recommend to people in terms of investing in your own self-development?
That's a good question. I think what I would recommend, and that's what I do for myself, is to try to replicate the top dollar training experience on your own level as much as you can. And I think something that we discussed here, one of the things that we really focus on in our trainings is to get people not only to see and hear the content, but also to apply it.
Yeah.
So as I said, there's a lot of activity. It's very practical. And I think when you are focusing on your own, so on your personal development, pick the topic, the skill that you want to grow, and then find a way to apply it. So if you're going to read a book, then do the exercises or the activities that I recommended, at least one or two. Because what happens is that it builds a neural pathway. So something happens inside your brain that now that information is not passive anymore. It's become active because you've done it once. Doing it once is not going to make you good at it, but at least now it's stored somewhere in your brain, and it's going to be a lot easier to replicate it and to build on it compared to, and that's what I see a lot of people do. I love e-learning modules. I think the quality of e-learning modules has increased significantly the last few years. But that's one of the downside of e-learning modules is that it's very passive. You consume the information and then you don't do anything with it.
Right.
Unless you go and you apply. You can create a set of exercises for yourself based on what the book that you're reading was saying. And this is really, that makes a huge difference. And people can really speed up their learning and the development by just adding that application.
Interesting. And that's something we probably often fail to do. You invest the time in listening to the books, listening to the podcasts, even listening to the audiobooks, but actually you don't go and follow through and do. And it's interesting that you say, that's what really makes a difference between kind of hearing something and starting to be able to apply it. So as I wrap up here, what I'm going to do is I'll link to both of your profiles on LinkedIn if listeners would like to follow up, reach out, contact you. That's going to be at artofprocurement.com/AEP training. That's all one word. That's artofprocurement.com/AEP training. So just one last time, Matt, Marcia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.